My name is Rosie Wilson, and I'm 77 years old. What I'm about to tell you will forever change how you look at your own family. Just 2 years ago, my own son Victor pushed my husband Harold and me off a 90-foot cliff, believing he was committing the perfect murder. As we tumbled through the air, rocks tearing at our clothes, Harold's desperate voice cut through the wind. "Don't move, Rosie. Pretend we're dead." But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was lying there, broken and bleeding, listening to my son make a phone call above us. "It's done," he said, his voice cold as winter steel. "The old fools are finally out of the way." For 53 beautiful years, Harold has been my rock, my partner, my best friend. We raised Victor with everything we had, sacrificing vacations, driving old cars, working extra jobs just to give him every opportunity. We thought we'd built the perfect family. Sunday dinners around our oak table, Christmas mornings filled with laughter, bedtime stories that stretched long into the night because we couldn't bear to leave his room. I was a kindergarten teacher for 37 years, and Harold worked construction, his hands rough and calloused from building homes for other families while we saved every penny for our son's future. We weren't rich, but we were rich in love. Or so I thought. How does a mother's love become so twisted that her own child sees her as nothing more than an obstacle to money? How does the little boy who used to crawl into your bed during thunderstorms grow up to push you off a cliff without a moment's hesitation? The answer, like most family tragedies, began with a lie. A single lie told by my brother Bernard that would eventually cost us everything we held dear. A lie about money we never had, creating greed we never saw coming. As I lay on that rocky ledge, feeling Harold's labored breathing beside me, I realized that the son I thought I knew had died years ago. What lived in his place was a stranger wearing Victor's face, capable of unspeakable cruelty. But that was just the beginning of a nightmare that would tear our family apart and teach me that sometimes the people we love most are the ones we know the least. Have you ever discovered something about your family that completely shattered everything you believed? Tell me in the comments below, and let's continue with my story. Let me take you back to the beginning, to when our family was whole and beautiful, before greed poisoned everything we held sacred. Harold and I met at a church social in 1970. I was 22, fresh out of teaching college, and he was 24, just back from Vietnam with gentle eyes that had seen too much. Our first dance was to The Way You Look Tonight, and I swear I fell in love with his shy smile before the song ended. We married the following spring in a simple ceremony at St. Mary's. I wore my mother's dress, altered to fit my smaller frame, and Harold wore his father's suit. We couldn't afford much, but we had each other, and that felt like everything. Victor came along 3 years later, after 2 heartbreaking miscarriages that nearly broke us. When the doctor placed that perfect, screaming bundle in my arms, I wept with joy. Harold's hands shook as he touched Victor's tiny fingers, and he whispered, "He's going to have everything we never did, Rosie. Everything." And we tried to give him everything. Our little house on Maple Street wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for our small table, but it was filled with love. Every morning, I'd make Harold's coffee in the same blue mug, pack his lunch in the metal box his father had used, and kiss him goodbye at the front door. Then I'd wake Victor with tickles and silly songs, making breakfast while he chattered about his dreams from the night before. Sunday dinners were sacred in our house. Harold would carve the roast, always a roast on Sundays, even when money was tight, while Victor told us about school, his friends, his latest adventure. The boy had such an imagination, spinning tales about dragons in the backyard and pirates in the creek behind our house. Harold and I would exchange glances across the table, our hearts full to bursting with pride and love. Christmas mornings were magical. We'd wake before dawn to Victor's excited squeals, and Harold would make his famous pancakes while I started the coffee. Victor would tear through his presents, never many, but always chosen with such care, and then we'd spend the day playing with his new toys, building forts out of couch cushions, reading stories by the fireplace. Harold taught Victor to fish at Miller's Pond, their Saturday morning ritual for years. They'd come home with muddy boots and empty hands more often than not, but their faces glowing with shared secrets and inside jokes. "The fish were too smart for us today, Mama," Victor would announce solemnly, and Harold would wink at me over his head. I taught Victor to read before he started school, curled up together in the old rocking chair my grandmother had given me. His favorite book was Where the Wild Things Are, and he'd make me read it over and over until I had it memorized. Sometimes I'd catch Harold listening from the doorway, his face soft with contentment. Victor was a good student, not brilliant, but steady and hard-working. He played Little League baseball. Harold never missed a game, even when he had to leave work early. I was the team mom, organizing snacks and cheering from the bleachers. After games, we'd go to Murphy's Diner for ice cream, Victor still in his grass-stained uniform, recounting every play in vivid detail. High school brought new challenges. Victor grew quieter, more moody, but we figured that was normal teenage behavior. He had friends, decent grades, a part-time job at the hardware store. He talked about college, maybe studying business or engineering. Harold and I started a special savings account, adding $20 or $30 whenever we could spare it. When Victor graduated, we threw a party in our backyard. All the neighbors came, bringing covered dishes and congratulations. Harold grilled burgers while I fussed over the potato salad, and Victor actually seemed happy, laughing with his friends, hugging his old teachers. That night, after everyone left, the three of us sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "I'm proud of you, son," Harold said, his arm around Victor's shoulders. "Your mother and we're so proud." Victor leaned against his father, and for a moment, he was our little boy again. "I love you guys," he whispered. "I'm going to make you proud. I'm going to take care of you when you're old." If only I had known that those words would come back to haunt us in the most twisted way possible. Victor went to community college for 2 years, then transferred to the state university. We visited him once a month, bringing homemade cookies and clean laundry. He seemed to be thriving, new friends, good grades, plans for the future. When he brought Deborah home for Thanksgiving his junior year, we were thrilled. She was pretty and polite, complimenting my cooking and asking Harold about his work. They married the summer after graduation in a lovely ceremony at Deborah's family church. I cried during the vows, watching my baby boy promise to love and cherish this sweet girl. Harold walked him down the aisle. Victor's father had died when he was young, and I saw tears in both their eyes. The grandchildren came next, Marcus, then Abigail 2 years later. Oh, how we loved those babies. Every weekend, they'd come to Grandma and Grandpa's house, filling our quiet home with laughter and chaos. I'd bake cookies while Harold built elaborate blanket forts. We'd read stories, play games, take walks to the park. Victor seemed like a devoted father, coaching Marcus's soccer team, attending Abigail's dance recitals. Deborah was involved in the PTA, always organizing fundraisers and school events. From the outside, we looked like the perfect extended family, 3 generations bound by love and tradition. But perfect families, as I would learn, often hide the darkest secrets. What I'm about to tell you next will shock you to your core. But first, I need to know, do you think family loyalty should have limits? When does protecting family become enabling them? Share your thoughts below. The first crack in our perfect family facade appeared on a crisp October morning, 6 months before Victor tried to kill us. Harold and I had made a decision that seemed perfectly reasonable at the time. We were going to sell our house. At 75, the maintenance had become overwhelming. The roof needed repairs we couldn't afford, the furnace was on its last legs, and the stairs to the second floor had become treacherous for Harold's arthritic knees. We'd found a lovely retirement community called Sunset Manor, with a small apartment that would be perfect for our golden years. More importantly, selling the house would give us enough money to secure our future care and fulfill a promise we'd made to ourselves years ago, setting aside college funds for Marcus and Abigail. We'd already saved $30,000 for each child, but the house sale would allow us to make it $60,000 each, ensuring they could attend any college they chose without the burden of student loans that had plagued their parents. I was excited as I dialed Victor's number that Sunday morning, imagining his relief that we'd finally made this practical decision. Harold was in the kitchen making his famous blueberry pancakes, humming an old tune from our courting days. "Victor, honey," I said when he answered, "your father and I have some news. We've decided to sell the house and move to Sunset Manor. Isn't that wonderful? We'll be so much more comfortable, and..." The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Victor? Are you there? You're selling?" His voice was strange, flat in a way I'd never heard before. "Without consulting me?" I laughed, thinking he was joking. "Well, sweetheart, it's our house. We thought you'd be happy that we're finally being practical about our future. That's my childhood home." The words came out sharp, angry. "You can't just sell my childhood home without talking to me first." Harold looked up from the stove, his eyebrows raised in concern. I covered the phone and whispered, "He's upset about the house." "Victor," I said gently, "I understand it's emotional. It's emotional for us too. But honey, we're getting older, and this is the smart thing to do. What about my inheritance?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually gasped, my hand flying to my chest. Harold dropped his spatula, the sound echoing in our suddenly silent kitchen. Your inheritance?" I stammered. "Don't play dumb, Mom. I know about the money. Uncle Bernard told me everything before he died. My brother Bernard had passed away 3 years earlier, and I had no idea what Victor was talking about. Bernard had always been a storyteller, prone to exaggeration and flights of fancy, but what could he possibly have told Victor about money? "Sweetheart, I don't understand." "What money?" Victor's laugh was bitter, a sound I'd never heard from my gentle son. "The family money, Mom. The trust fund. The investments. Bernard said Grandma Wilson left a fortune that you've been hiding all these years." My heart was pounding so hard I could barely speak. "Victor, there is no family money. There never has been. Your grandmother left us this house and a few $1,000s that we used for your college. That's all." Bullshit. The profanity from my son's mouth shocked me more than anything else. Victor had never, not once in his entire life, used language like that in front of me. "Victor Wilson, you watch your mouth," I said automatically, falling back on the mother's voice that had corrected him 1,000 times as a child. "I'm 45 years old, Mother. I think I can say whatever I damn well please. And I think you and Dad have been lying to me my whole life." The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, my hands shaking, while Harold rushed to my side. Rosie? What happened? You're white as a sheet. I told him everything, watching his face grow more troubled with each word. When I finished, he sank into his chair at the kitchen table, suddenly looking every one of his 77 years. Bernard, he said quietly. That fool brother of yours and his tall tales. What do you mean? Harold rubbed his face with both hands. Remember how Bernard used to brag at family gatherings? About his investments, his connections, his big plans? He always made everything sound grander than it was. And after your mother died, he started telling people she'd left some kind of family fortune. But that's ridiculous. Mama was a seamstress. Daddy worked at the grain elevator. They never had more than a few $100s in the bank at any given time. I know that, and you know that, but Bernard liked to feel important. And apparently, he convinced Victor that we've been sitting on some kind of treasure all these years. The implications hit me like a truck. Harold, Victor thinks we've been lying to him. He thinks we're rich and we've been pretending to be poor. That would explain a lot, Harold said grimly. What do you mean? Haven't you noticed how he's been acting lately? The questions about our finances, the way he looks around the house like he's appraising everything? Last month when he was here, I caught him going through the papers in your desk. I had noticed, but I dismissed it as normal concern for aging parents. Now, with this new context, every interaction from the past few months took on a sinister cast. The phone rang, making us both jump. It was Deborah. Rosie, she said, her voice syrupy sweet, Victor told me about your plans to sell the house. How exciting! But before you do anything hasty, maybe we should all sit down and discuss your financial situation. You know, make sure you're making the best decisions for your future. There was something in her tone that made my skin crawl. We've thought this through very carefully, Deborah. We're comfortable with our decision. But are you sure you're being realistic about your needs? Retirement communities can be so expensive. Maybe Victor and I could help you explore other options. We could even look into having you move in with us. The idea of living with Victor and Deborah, especially after this morning's conversation, filled me with dread. That's very kind, but we're happy with our choice. Well, Deborah said, and I could hear the steel beneath the sugar, we'll see about that. Family needs to stick together, especially when it comes to important financial decisions. After she hung up, Harold and I sat in our kitchen, the pancakes growing cold on the stove, trying to process what had just happened. They think we're hiding money, I said finally. A lot of money, from the sound of it. What are we going to do? Harold reached across the table and took my hand. We're going to tell them the truth. We're going to show them our bank statements, our savings account, everything. Once they see the reality of our situation, this will all blow over. But even as he said it, I could see the doubt in his eyes. And deep in my heart, I knew this wasn't going to blow over. This was just the beginning of something much darker. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Harold's troubled breathing beside me. For the first time in 53 years of marriage, I felt afraid in my own home. Not of strangers or burglars, but of my own son. How naive I was to think the truth would set us free. I had no idea that the truth would nearly get us killed. I should have seen the signs earlier. Looking back, they were everywhere. Have you ever ignored red flags from someone you loved? What happened? I want to hear your stories in the comments. The weeks following that terrible phone call brought a parade of unexpected visits, each one more unsettling than the last. Victor and Deborah began showing up at our house without warning, always with some excuse. They were in the neighborhood, or they'd brought the kids to see Grandma and Grandpa, or they just wanted to check on us. But I wasn't fooled. I could see the way their eyes swept our modest living room, cataloging every piece of furniture, every family photo, every potential hiding place for the fortune they believed we were concealing. The first incident that truly frightened me happened on a Tuesday afternoon in November. I'd gone to the grocery store, leaving Harold at home watching his afternoon game shows. When I returned, I found Victor in our bedroom, going through the papers in my jewelry box. "Victor!" I gasped, dropping my grocery bags. "What are you doing?" He spun around, his face flushed with guilt and anger. "I was looking for Mom's insurance papers. Dad said you might need help organizing your important documents." It was a lie, and we both knew it. Harold would never send Victor to rifle through my personal belongings without asking me first. But what chilled me most was the look in Victor's eyes, cold, calculating, completely devoid of the warmth I'd known my entire life as his mother. "Those papers are in the filing cabinet in the den," I said quietly. "They always have been." Victor pushed past me without another word, leaving me standing in my violated bedroom, my hands shaking as I tried to process what I'd just witnessed. That evening, Harold and I had our first real argument in years. "We need to confront him," I insisted as we cleaned up after dinner. "This has gone too far." He was going through my jewelry box, Harold. My private things. "Maybe he really was looking for insurance papers," Harold said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You don't believe that any more than I do." I slammed a plate into the dishwasher harder than necessary. "Our son is searching our house for money that doesn't exist, and you want to make excuses for him?" Harold sank into his chair, suddenly looking ancient. "What's the alternative, Rosie? Call the police on our own son? Accuse him of what? Looking through papers in his childhood home?" I wanted to scream at him, to shake him, to make him see what was happening. But looking at my husband's defeated posture, I realized he was as frightened as I was. We were both grappling with the impossible reality that our beloved son had become a stranger. The incidents escalated. Deborah started calling daily, always with questions about our investment portfolio and suggestions that they should take over managing our finances. She'd speak in that sickeningly sweet voice, but her questions were pointed, probing. "Rosie, dear," she'd say, "Victor and I have been talking, and we think you and Harold might benefit from some professional financial advice. We know a wonderful advisor who specializes in helping seniors maximize their assets." When I politely declined, her tone would shift subtly. "Well, I just hope you're not making any major decisions without consulting family. It would be such a shame if you made a mistake that affected everyone." The threat was barely veiled, but it was there. One afternoon, while Victor was supposedly helping Harold fix a leaky faucet, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. I'd gone to the basement to get some old towels when I heard voices from the kitchen above. "They have to have more money somewhere," Deborah was saying. "Bernard was very specific about the family trust. Your mother's grandmother was supposedly quite wealthy." "I've looked everywhere," Victor replied, his voice tight with frustration. "If there's money, it's not in this house." Then it's in a bank somewhere. Safety deposit boxes, maybe. Or investments under different names. How are we supposed to find that? We need to get power of attorney, Deborah said. Once we have legal control over their finances, we can access everything. I pressed myself against the basement wall, my heart hammering so loudly I was afraid they'd hear it upstairs. They'll never agree to that, Victor said. They will if they think it's for their own good. We just need to convince them they're not capable of managing their affairs anymore. A few incidents, some confusion about bills, maybe a small accident. What kind of accident? Nothing serious. Just enough to make them realize they need help. Old people fall all the time, Victor. Sometimes they hit their heads and get confused about things. I had to bite my knuckle to keep from crying out. My own daughter-in-law was discussing ways to hurt us, to make us appear incompetent so they could steal money we didn't even have. When they left that day, I told Harold everything I'd heard. His face went gray, and for a moment I thought he might have a heart attack. We need to call the police, I said. And tell them what? That we overheard our son and daughter-in-law talking about power of attorney? Rosie, they haven't actually done anything illegal yet. They're planning to hurt us, Harold. We don't know that for certain. Maybe Deborah was just thinking out loud. Maybe she didn't mean it literally. But I could see in his eyes that he didn't believe his own words. He was as terrified as I was, but he couldn't bring himself to accept that our son might actually harm us. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Marcus, our 16-year-old grandson, called us in tears. Grandma, he sobbed into the phone, I need to tell you something, but you can't let Mom and Dad know I called. What is it, sweetheart? What's wrong? I heard them fighting last night. Really fighting, not just arguing. Dad was yelling about money, and Mom was screaming back about some plan they had. And then, his voice broke. Then Mom said something about accidents happening to old people all the time, and how nobody would question it if you and Grandpa got hurt. The room spun around me. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Marcus, listen to me very carefully. Are you safe? Are you and Abigail okay? I think so. They don't know I heard them. But Grandma, I'm scared. I think they want to hurt you. Where are you now? At school. I called from the payphone in the hallway. Good boy. Now listen, I want you to act completely normal when you go home. Don't let them know you called us, and don't confront them about what you heard. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am. And Marcus? If anything happens, if you feel unsafe at all, you call us immediately. Do you understand? I understand. Grandma? I love you and Grandpa. I don't want anything bad to happen to you. Nothing's going to happen to us, sweetheart. We're going to figure this out. But as I hung up the phone, I realized I had no idea how to figure anything out. We were trapped in a nightmare of our own son's making, and every day brought us closer to some terrible conclusion. That night, Harold and I sat at our kitchen table with all our financial documents spread out before us, bank statements, savings account records, the deed to the house, everything we owned in the world. This is it, Harold said, gesturing at the papers. This is everything we have. The house, about 40,000 in savings, and the 60,000 we've set aside for the grandchildren's college. We're not rich, Rosie. We never have been. But they don't believe that, I said. They think we're hiding millions somewhere. Then we'll show them these papers. We'll prove to them that there's no hidden fortune. I looked at my husband, this good man who'd worked his whole life to provide for his family, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November weather outside. Harold, I said quietly, what if showing them the truth doesn't help? What if they're so desperate for money that they don't care whether we actually have it or not? He didn't answer, but I saw the fear in his eyes. We both knew that we were dealing with people who had moved far beyond reason, far beyond the love that had once bound our family together. What I discovered next made my blood run cold, and it would change everything we thought we knew about our son and daughter-in-law. What I discovered next made my blood run cold. But before I reveal it, I need to ask, have you ever been betrayed by someone you completely trusted? How did it feel when you realized the truth? Let me know in the comments. The truth about Victor and Deborah's desperation came to light in the most unexpected way. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who inadvertently gave us the first real clue about what was driving their increasingly erratic behavior. Mrs. Patterson had lived next door to us for 20 years, and she was the kind of neighbor who noticed everything, every car that came and went, every visitor, every change in routine. She was also the biggest gossip in our neighborhood, which usually annoyed me. That day, her nosiness may have saved our lives. I was hanging laundry on the line behind our house when she called over the fence. Rosie, dear, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything all right with Victor and Deborah? I've seen some rather concerning people at their house lately. I paused, a wet sheet in my hands. What kind of people? Well, yesterday there were two men in expensive suits who didn't look very friendly. They were there for about an hour, and when they left, I could hear shouting from inside the house. And last week, there was a woman with a briefcase who looked like she might be from some kind of collection agency. My stomach dropped. Collection agency? Oh yes, I've seen enough of them over the years to recognize the type. Very official looking, very serious. She was there for quite a while too. That evening, I shared Mrs. Patterson's observations with Harold. We decided we needed to know more about Victor and Deborah's financial situation. If they were in serious debt, it would explain their desperate search for money that didn't exist. Harold suggested we drive by their house, just to see if we noticed anything unusual. I felt ridiculous, like we were spying on our own family, but I was too frightened to ignore the warning signs any longer. Their house was in a newer subdivision about 15 minutes from ours, a large colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn that had always made me proud of Victor's success. But as we drove slowly past, I noticed things I'd never seen before, or maybe I just never wanted to see them. There was a notice taped to their front door. Harold parked across the street, and I used the small binoculars we kept in the car for bird watching to read it. It was a final notice from the electric company, threatening disconnection for non-payment. Harold, I whispered, they're about to have their electricity shut off. We sat there for another few minutes, and I noticed more troubling signs. The lawn, which had always been Victor's pride and joy, was brown and patchy. One of the shutters was hanging crooked, and there were newspapers piled up on the front porch, suggesting they might not even be staying there regularly. As we were about to leave, a car pulled into their driveway. It wasn't Victor's truck or Deborah's sedan, it was a black luxury car with tinted windows. Two men in dark suits got out and walked to the front door with the confident stride of people who were used to being feared. "We need to go," Harold said urgently, starting the car. "Now." We drove home in silence, both of us processing what we'd seen. Our son and daughter-in-law weren't just in financial trouble, they were in serious, dangerous trouble. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those men, about the notices on the door, about the desperation I'd heard in Victor's voice during our phone conversations. Finally, around 3 a.m, I got up and went to Harold's desk in the den. I'd never been one to snoop, but fear makes you do things you never thought you'd do. I started going through the papers Harold kept in his desk drawers, old bills, insurance documents, tax returns. I wasn't sure what I was looking for until I found it. Hidden beneath a stack of old bank statements was a folder I'd never seen before. Inside were photocopies of documents that made my blood freeze in my veins. They were loan applications, all in Victor's name, all for substantial amounts of money. But what terrified me most were the names of the lending companies. They weren't banks or credit unions. They were private lenders with names like Quick Cash Solutions and Emergency Funding Services. The kind of places that charged outrageous interest rates and used intimidation tactics to collect their debts. According to the documents, Victor owed over $200,000 to various lenders. The interest rates were astronomical, some as high as 30%. The payment schedules showed that he was supposed to be making monthly payments of nearly $8,000. There was no way Victor could afford payments like that. His carpentry business was successful, but not that successful. And if he'd missed even a few payments... I thought about those men in the expensive suits, and I understood why Victor and Deborah were so desperate to find money that didn't exist. But the worst discovery was yet to come. At the bottom of the folder was a handwritten note in Victor's familiar scrawl. It was dated just 2 weeks earlier, and it was addressed to someone named Mr. Castellano. "Mr. Castellano," the note read, "I understand your concerns about the overdue payments. I want to assure you that I will have the full amount within the next month. My parents have significant assets that will become available to me very soon. I just need a little more time to arrange the transfer. Please don't take any action against my family until then. I guarantee you will have your money." I had to read it 3 times before the full implications sank in. Victor had promised these dangerous people that he would pay them with money from us. He'd essentially put our lives up as collateral for his debts. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. I stumbled back to our bedroom, where Harold was sleeping fitfully. "Harold," I whispered, shaking his shoulder. "Harold, wake up. You need to see this." I showed him everything, the loan documents, the payment schedules, the note to Mr. Castellano. I watched his face go through the same progression of emotions I'd experienced: confusion, disbelief, and finally, terrible understanding. "He's told them we have money," Harold said quietly. "He's promised to pay them with money we don't have. What happens when he can't deliver?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. Harold was quiet for a long time, staring at the papers spread across our bed. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "People like this don't just write off $200,000, Rosie. If Victor can't pay them, they'll come after him. And if they think we're the source of the money..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. We both understood the implications. "We have to go to the police," I said. "With what? Photocopies of loan documents?" A note that doesn't explicitly threaten anyone? Rosie, we don't even know how I got these papers. I stared at him. What do you mean, you don't know how you got them? Harold's face crumpled. Victor gave them to me 3 weeks ago. He said he was in some financial trouble and asked if I could help him understand the terms of his loans. I told him I'd look them over, but then I guess I forgot about them. Or maybe I didn't want to think about what they meant. You've known about this for 3 weeks? I knew he owed money. I didn't know how much, and I didn't know about the note to this Castellano person. That must have been added to the folder later. I felt a surge of anger at my husband, but it was quickly overwhelmed by fear. If Harold had had these documents for weeks, it meant Victor had been planning something for at least that long. The note was dated after Harold received the folder, which meant Victor had access to his father's desk, had been monitoring what we knew about his situation. Harold, I said slowly, if Victor put that note in your desk, it means he knows we have these documents. He knows we know about his debts. The implications hit us both at the same time. Victor wasn't just desperate for money, he was desperate and cornered, with dangerous people breathing down his neck and parents who now knew the truth about his situation. We're not safe here, I whispered. As if summoned by my words, we heard the sound of a car pulling into our driveway. It was 4:30 in the morning. Harold and I looked at each other in terror, then crept to the bedroom window. Victor's truck was parked in our driveway, but he wasn't getting out. He was just sitting there, staring at our house. Even in the dim light from the street lamp, I could see the tension in his posture, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel. We watched for 10 minutes, neither of us daring to breathe. Finally, Victor started the truck and drove away, but not before I saw him make a phone call. He's watching us, I said. He knows we know. Harold gathered up all the documents and stuffed them back into the folder. We need to get these somewhere safe. Somewhere Victor can't get to them. Where? Your sister's house. We'll drive over there first thing in the morning and leave them with Janet. Then we'll figure out what to do next. But as we lay in bed waiting for dawn, both of us too frightened to sleep, I had a terrible feeling that we were already out of time. Victor wasn't just desperate anymore, he was dangerous. And we were the only thing standing between him and the money he'd promised people who didn't accept excuses. The next morning, Victor called with an invitation that would change everything. Mom, he said, his voice artificially cheerful, Deborah and I were thinking it would be nice to take you and Dad on a little trip. You know, spend some quality family time together before you move to that retirement place. What kind of trip? I asked, my mouth dry with fear. Just a day trip up to Falcons Point. Remember how we used to go there when I was a kid? We could have a picnic, take some pictures, enjoy the fall colors. Falcons Point. The scenic overlook where we'd taken Victor for family outings when he was young. The same overlook with a 100-foot drop to the rocky gorge below. And that's when they made their move. I know what you're thinking right now, you're probably as shocked as I was. But this story isn't over yet. The worst was still to come. Before I continue, tell me, what would you have done in my situation? I'm curious about your thoughts. We should have said no. We should have hung up the phone, packed our bags, and driven straight to the police station. But when your own child is asking you to spend time with him, when he's using that sweet voice you remember from his childhood, it's almost impossible to believe he means you harm. Almost. Harold and I spent the morning of the trip in a state of barely controlled terror, going through the motions of preparing for what we both suspected might be our last day alive. I packed a small picnic lunch with trembling hands, sandwiches Victor had loved as a child, cookies I'd made 1,000 times before. Harold checked and rechecked his pocket to make sure his cell phone was there, though we both knew there was no signal at Falcon's Point. "Maybe we're wrong," I said as I wrapped the sandwiches in wax paper. "Maybe he really does just want to spend time with us." Harold didn't answer, but I saw him slip a small pocket knife into his jacket. My gentle husband, who wouldn't hurt a fly, was arming himself against our own son. Victor arrived at exactly 10 o'clock, just as he'd promised. He was alone. Deborah had stayed home with the children, he explained, because Abigail had a dance recital to prepare for. I was almost relieved. Whatever Victor was planning, at least our grandchildren wouldn't have to witness it. He seemed nervous, chattering more than usual as we drove toward the mountains. He talked about the weather, about the beautiful fall colors, about memories from his childhood. But his hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, and I caught him checking the rearview mirror obsessively. "Are we being followed?" I asked, turning to look behind us. "What? No, of course not. Why would you think that?" But his voice was too high, too quick. Someone was following us, or Victor was expecting someone to follow us. Either way, it confirmed our worst fears about what this trip really was. Falcon's Point was exactly as I remembered it, a breathtaking overlook with a panoramic view of the valley below. On a normal day, it would have been beautiful. The autumn leaves were at their peak, painting the mountainside in brilliant reds and golds. But knowing what I knew, the place felt ominous, like a stage set for tragedy. Victor parked in the small gravel lot, and we walked toward the overlook in silence. The wind was stronger up here, whipping my hair around my face and making Harold's jacket flap like a flag. There were no other visitors, we were completely alone. "Remember when we used to come here when I was little?" Victor said, his voice strained. "You'd pack those peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and Dad would point out all the different trees in the valley." "I remember," I said softly. "You were so excited about everything. You wanted to know the name of every bird, every flower." For a moment, his face softened, and I saw a glimpse of the little boy I'd raised. But then his expression hardened again, and I knew the time for pretending was over. "We need to talk," Victor said, leading us closer to the edge of the cliff. "About the money." "Victor," Harold said carefully, "we've told you the truth. There is no hidden money. We've shown you our bank statements, our—" "Stop lying!" Victor exploded, his voice echoing off the rocks. "I know about the trust fund. I know about the investments. Uncle Bernard told me everything before he died." "Bernard was confused," I said desperately. "He was sick, Victor. He didn't know what he was saying. He knew exactly what he was saying. He told me about Grandma Wilson's family, about the money that was supposed to come to you when you turned 65. Where is it, Mom? Where are you hiding it?" I looked into my son's eyes and saw a stranger, wild, desperate, dangerous. This wasn't the boy I'd raised, the man I'd loved unconditionally for 45 years. This was someone else entirely, someone capable of anything. "Victor," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "even if there was money, which there isn't, why would it matter so much? You have your business, your family. Why are you so desperate for—" Because I'm going to die if I don't get it, he screamed. Do you understand that? I owe people money, dangerous people, and they're going to kill me if I don't pay them. Then let us help you, Harold said, stepping forward. We'll figure something out. We'll sell the house, liquidate everything we have. It won't be enough to pay off all your debts, but maybe we can negotiate with these people, buy you some time to. It's too late for that, Victor said, and his voice was suddenly calm, which frightened me more than his screaming had. I already told them I'd have the money by today. I promised them I'd have it. Today? I whispered. Victor nodded, and I saw tears in his eyes. They're waiting at the bottom of the mountain. If I don't come down with $200,000, they're going to hurt Deborah and the kids. My heart broke for him, even as I realized what he was planning to do to us. Oh, Victor. Oh, my poor boy. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, and I could hear the genuine anguish in his voice. I'm so sorry. But I can't let them hurt my family. We are your family too, Harold said quietly. I know. But you're old. You've lived your lives. Marcus and Abigail are just kids. They deserve a chance to grow up. He was moving closer to us now, backing us toward the edge of the cliff. I could hear the wind whistling through the rocks below, could feel the emptiness behind me. Victor, please, I begged. There has to be another way. There is no other way, he shouted. Don't you understand? I've looked everywhere. I've torn your house apart. If you have money hidden somewhere, you need to tell me now. We don't have any money, Harold yelled back. We never did. Your uncle was lying, or confused, or trying to make himself feel important. There is no family fortune. Victor's face crumpled, and for a moment I thought he might break down, might come to his senses. But then his expression hardened again, and I saw him make his decision. Then I guess this is the only way, he said. He lunged toward us with his arms outstretched, intending to push us over the edge. But Harold, my brave Harold, was ready for him. At the last second, he grabbed Victor's wrist and pulled him forward. If we're going to die, Harold shouted, you're coming with us. For a moment, all three of us teetered on the edge of the cliff, locked together in a deadly embrace. I could see the rocks below, could feel gravity pulling us down. Then Victor's foot slipped on the loose gravel, and we all went over together. The fall seemed to last forever and no time at all. I felt Harold's hand in mine, felt the wind rushing past us, heard Victor screaming. Then everything went black. I couldn't believe what happened next. It was like something out of a movie, except this was my real life. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who were hurting you? How did you find the courage? I woke up on a narrow ledge about 30 feet down from the top of the cliff, my body screaming with pain but miraculously alive. Harold was beside me, conscious but badly hurt. His leg was bent at an unnatural angle, and blood was trickling from a gash on his forehead. Don't move, he whispered urgently. Pretend we're dead. Above us, I could hear Victor groaning, apparently also alive but injured. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I heard him moving around, then the sound of his cell phone. It's done, he said, his voice carrying clearly in the mountain air. The old fools are dead. I'll be down in a few minutes. He was talking to those dangerous men, the ones who had been waiting at the bottom of the mountain. My son was telling them he'd murdered his own parents for money that never existed. We lay still for what felt like hours after Victor left, afraid to move, afraid to make any sound that might bring him back. Finally, when we were sure he was gone, Harold managed to call 911 on his cell phone. The rescue took 3 hours, we were in a difficult location, and both of us needed medical attention. The police found Victor at the bottom of the mountain, trying to convince 2 very angry men that his parents' deaths would somehow produce the money he owed them. When they realized there was no money, that Victor had essentially killed us for nothing, they beat him severely before the police arrived. Victor survived, but he was arrested and charged with attempted murder. During the trial, the full extent of his debts came to light, along with evidence of his gambling addiction and the threats he'd received from various creditors. Deborah testified against him, claiming she'd known nothing about his plans, though we later learned she'd been the one to suggest Falcons Point as the perfect location for an accident. Victor was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Deborah received 5 years as an accessory. Marcus and Abigail came to live with us, and we used what remained of our savings to get them the counseling they needed to process their parents' betrayal. The hardest part wasn't the physical recovery, though that took months. It was learning to trust again, learning to believe that not everyone we loved would eventually try to hurt us. The children helped with that. Their innocence, their resilience, their capacity for love despite everything they'd been through, reminded us that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who choose to stand by you when everything falls apart. Victor writes to us sometimes from prison. His letters are full of apologies and regret, begging for forgiveness we're not sure we can give. He claims he's found God, that he's a changed man, that he never meant for things to go so far. Maybe that's true. Maybe prison has given him the clarity that desperation had stolen from him. But I'll never forget the look in his eyes that day on the cliff, cold, calculating, completely devoid of the love I'd spent 45 years nurturing. That wasn't temporary desperation. That was something much darker, something that had been growing inside him for years while I was too blind to see it. Harold and I are in our 80s now, and we know we don't have many years left. But we're spending them surrounded by love, real love, not the twisted version that nearly killed us. Marcus is in college studying engineering, just like his uncle Richard had planned to do all those years ago. Abigail is a senior in high school, planning to become a teacher like her grandmother. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we love most. But sometimes, if we're very lucky, love finds a way to heal even the deepest wounds. Thank you for going on this incredible journey with me. This experience changed my life forever, and I hope my story helps someone else who might be going through something similar. Please share your own family stories in the comments below, the good, the bad, and the unbelievable. And if this story impacted you, please like this video and subscribe for more true family stories. Until next time, remember that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we know the least.